Back in May of this year, Corporal Trevino was apprehended in the act of making a drug transaction while dressed in his uniform. An exhaustive investigation of Trevino's acts was carried out by multiple law enforcement agencies, including the Bexar County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, the Internal Revenue Service, the Texas Rangers, and the San Antonio Police Department. Trevino was followed by the investigating team, and they followed him to the place where he met up with another suspect, Rudy Anthony de la Cruz, as stated by Sheriff Javier Salazar. A gas station on Broadway Street inside Loop 410 served as the location of their get-together. Both of the suspects were taken into custody as soon as the drug transaction was completed by the authorities. The surveillance crew became aware of a drug transaction that was taking place, and as a result, they intervened and detained both parties. According to Salazar, the constable was on his way to work to smuggle these drugs into the Bexar County Jail, but we detained him before that could be done. This is despite the fact that the constable is not a peace officer and that he was carrying a firearm and wearing his uniform at the time of his arrest. According to Salazar, Trevino was terminated from his position as a police officer in a dishonorable manner on June 27, 2019, 1 month after the arrest. Heroin and Suboxone were discovered by the cops on Trevino and his accomplice. The former corporal has served as an officer for 5 years, and the sheriff believes that he has been operating his drug smuggling side operation for a considerable amount of time. According to Salazar, he went to a lot of trouble to cover up his wrongdoings. It's not something we can allow that this suspect broke the public trust, the former deputy added, and the case has strong links to organized crime. The sheriff said in his statement about the officer's behavior, which also included his comments about the officer's conduct. This was confirmed by the FBI special agent who was in charge of the investigation. According to Christopher Combs, who also applauded Sheriff Salazar for his focus on rooting out public corruption, the sheriff's office and Sheriff Salazar have helped the FBI in all of our investigations into corruption, and without their support, we could not move forward on these cases. Christopher Combs also complimented Sheriff Salazar for his focus on rooting out public corruption. Together with the sheriff's office, we have spent a significant amount of time working on this case. According to the indictment, Trevino is currently being investigated for a total of 6 different felony offenses. Trevino is suspected of participating in organized crime, taking bribes, possessing a controlled substance with the aim to supply it, and other offenses. He is also accused of possessing a controlled substance with the intent to deliver it. An officer with the Oklahoma City Police Department was pulled over earlier this year and arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. Throughout the course of the investigation, the captain made several requests to the officer to turn off the body camera that he was wearing. The video from Sergeant Christopher Skinner's body camera was made available to the public on Thursday by the Oklahoma City Police Department. According to the video, the 55-year-old Captain James Matthew French was pulled over at midnight on March 12th after Sergeant Christopher Skinner allegedly observed his SUV swerving and making a turn without signaling. French is seen sitting in his vehicle in the driveway of the house he claims to share with his mother as the officer approaches the SUV and asks him if he's been drinking, to which French responds, "Please, officer." The officer then asks French if he's been drinking again, and French says, "Please, officer, Oklahoma." It appeared as though Princeton gestured to his chest before whispering to the officer that he wanted the camera turned off. The request left the sergeant feeling a little befuddled at first. He initially disregarded it and persisted in questioning the driver about how much he had consumed, despite the fact that French appeared to be very apprehensive. After a little period of silence, he eventually responded when the officer repeated himself. The request was made once more by French. French eventually gets out of his truck once he realizes that the officer is not going to respond to his request. When asked about his night and where he had been, French responded that he had been at a poker game and had consumed 3 or 4 beers, the most recent of which was around 2 hours prior to the traffic stop. French was then pulled over for a driving violation. When the police asked him if he believed he should drive, French responded, "No, but I came from 4 blocks away." When the intoxicated police captain was having a difficult time doing the necessary field sobriety tests and was aware that he was in trouble, Sergeant Skinner requested the assistance of his friends in order to complete the exams. At this moment, French made another desperate plea to the officer, pleading with him to switch off his camera. French was certain that all he wanted to do was take notes, despite the officer's response that he would do it once the inquiry was through. Sergeant Skinner answered, "As a sergeant, I have taken an oath to uphold the law, and I do not show favoritism to anyone, regardless of whether they are a member of a gang or the President of the United States." Because French is adamant on not completing the field deaths that Skinner has already started, the officer has no choice except to handcuff him. According to the report of the incident, French was taken into custody and booked on charges of driving under the influence of alcohol, as well as failing to signal the intention to turn after the sergeant turned off the body camera that he was wearing. Chief Wade Gurley of the Oklahoma City Police Department lauded the arresting officer for his professional demeanor, despite the fact that the police captain had repeatedly requested that the officer turn off his camera. In my perspective, the officer handled the incident in a very professional manner and answered precisely how he ought to have in that given circumstance. According to Gurley, the investigation into French's detention is still ongoing. Nevertheless, the captain has been placed on administrative leave. During the time of the event, French was driving an SUV that belonged to the city, according to the findings of the investigation. Prepare oneself for an unpleasant experience because the third incidence of a registered sexual predator will involve an uncomfortable situation. Devin Jalen, a member of the Jail and Judicial Services section of the San Diego County Sheriff's Department, was arrested in the year 2020 on suspicion of having sexual relations with a minor girl. In April of 2020, San Diego County Crime Stoppers received a tip regarding an anonymous guy who had engaged in illegal conduct with a youngster. This information led to the case being brought to the attention of the authorities. Rapidly opening an investigation into the matter, the Chula Vista Police Department found that all 4 victims were young children, ranging in age from 9 to 14 years old. BRS arrived after an investigation into the behavior of the former policeman had been going on for approximately 4 months. It is alleged by the prosecution that Fleer made contact with over 40 additional minors, largely through the use of Snapchat, and asked them for sexual favors. However, no one was ever discovered so that investigators could verify their ages. All of these occurrences took place within a span of 2 weeks in the year 2020, in the middle of the months of March and April. According to the Deputy District Attorney Jalen Wang, Fleer made it a point to specifically pursue young women, paid them to meet with him, and pushed them to invite their other young female friends to join them. Fleer also informs friends and acquaintances who have a similar interest in older guys about these get-togethers. The victims were concerned about the potential consequences of it being discovered that they had been speaking to a law enforcement officer. However, Wang revealed that Fleer did not conceal the fact that he was a police officer from these young girls. In fact, he actually showed it off by sending some of them pictures of himself in uniform. The victims were concerned about the potential consequences of it being discovered that they had been speaking to a law enforcement officer. Wang further disclosed that Fleer asked more than one of the women, "Do you have any friends who can give you money?" To put it simply, the younger the better. On July 24, 2020, just a little bit more than 5 years into his job with the sheriff's office, Fleer was charged with 20 sex offenses involving 4 underage victims. These offenses allegedly took place. After waiting another year, on May 7, 2021, the former constable entered a guilty plea to all of the accusations against him. The actions of the former officer shocked the judge, Michael Popkins, who was outraged by them. The court stated in his comments, "I have never seen a more despicable set of facts as I have seen in this case." The judge in the Fleer case decided to give the defendant a sentence of 12 years in state jail, with no probation on top of that, and usage of a major registry as a sex offender for the remainder of his life on the day of Fleer's guilty plea. According to a statement released by his attorney David P. Shapiro, Mr. Fleer initially and privately accepted responsibility for his improper actions quite some time ago. However, today marked the first step towards publicly apologizing to his friends and family, to law enforcement, and most importantly, to the victims and the families of those who were affected by his actions, the statement said. Jalen stated that Fleer willingly entered in a treatment program that began in the spring of last year in order to begin what is going to be a lengthy road to recovery and rehabilitation. This is to assure that he will never put himself, and more importantly anybody else, in harm's way again. Additionally, he stated that there will be no need for Fleer to testify in open court during either the preliminary hearing or the trial itself. If you wish to stay informed on the investigation, you should subscribe to the channel. In addition, feel free to share your ideas with me in the section provided below. Until next time, take care.